Good afternoon, guys, and welcome back to the Suburban Rifleman. My name is Greg. It's still raining cats and dogs outside. I'm still filming with my iPhone, so if the audio or video isn't what you've come to expect from the channel, I apologize right now. But I do have a couple of videos I'd like to make while the weather's crappy outside, so we're going to soldier on right through. I am likewise still working on getting together some military rifles and some old military cartridges to do some long-range shooting on the channel this summer. I think it'll be fun to ring the gongs at 500 yards if we can with older military rifles. I'm specifically talking about the 303 or older military cartridges. I'm specifically talking about the 303 British, the 8x57 Mauser or 7.92x57 Mauser. Certainly the 7.62 by 54 rimmed Russian rifle cartridge, maybe the 30-40 Krag, maybe the 8x56 Hungarian Mannlicher. We'll have to see how involved it gets. But as I stated in the last video, I've been kind of digging around in the dark corners of the cartridge cave, pulling out some of my more neglected rifles to use as test platforms for this shooting project. And the last one was a fairly egregiously sporterized No.1 Mk.1 Star short magazine Lee Enfield made by BSA in 1916. The next rifle we're going to be taking a look at is an equally or even more horrendously sporterized No.4 Mk.1. This one is also from BSA. I have no idea what year this was manufactured because almost every single marking on this rifle was buffed off at some point in time. All of the wonderful inspection marks and acceptance marks and proof marks that the Brits put all over their guns, they're almost completely gone except on inside corners where the gunsmith couldn't get his buff wheel. This one is even more irredeemable than the last one. You can see there's no magazine in the rifle. Chamber's empty. She's safe. The barrel's been shortened by 3 inches. Now, luckily, we've only lost about an inch of sight radius. And the sight is about as high as the military sight. This is actually a rather nice Redfield band-type front sight, which was beautifully installed. I mean, the guy did a great job on that. It's about as tall as the military sight on a No.4 Mk.1. And yes, I know there were interchangeable front sight blades for the No.4 Mk.1, so it's not an exact science, but this is within the range. Unfortunately, the customer that commissioned all of this work apparently wanted to be able to shoot the rifle at 100 yards. And so the gunsmith also did a very nice job installing this barrel-mounted leaf sight from Lyman, which is moderately adjustable. And it does work at 100 yards, unlike the military sights, which were only regulated for, I think the shortest distance is 200 yards. I don't know why I said I think. I know the shortest distance is 200 yards. This does work at 100 yards. But it's also fitted into this actually pretty nice looking Bishop stock. It's a nice piece of American black walnut, but it's got this very high Monte Carlo style cheek piece with a big pad here. And man, it is hard to get down on this sight. Very difficult to get down on the sight at 100 yards. You're really, really pressing your face hard into this comb, into this cheek piece. And I can tell you from experience that shooting this rifle like that is going to leave you with a lovely Technicolor shiner on your cheekbone. So anyway, as I spelled out in the last video, I want to try shooting some older military rifles at longer ranges, much longer than the 100 yards that this sight affords. And one thing I really have always lamented was the fact that this rifle, when the gunsmith did all the other work to it, he removed the wonderful Mark I Singer type rear sight that was on this rifle originally. I know it was on there originally because I can see the wear marks from it. It's also would have been appropriate for the time period and style that this rifle is. The Singer sight, if you're not familiar with it, is a flip-up, micrometer adjustable, vernier type Aperature sight that's right here, close to the shooter's eye. It is a battle sight, but it's about as close to a target sight as a battle sight can get. It's certainly one of the finest and most adjustable and just overall good battle sights that was fitted to a military rifle during the 20th century. And I've always apparently erroneously assumed that because the British Ordnance Ministry went to a much more simplified L-shaped flip-type rear sight on the rifle late in the war and going forward, that the Singer sights were probably in pretty short demand. They probably are all in the hands of collectors, and if you can get one of these things, they're really beautiful, beautifully machined works of art that it would be exorbitantly expensive to buy one. And I never really looked into getting the proper rear sight for this rifle until about a week ago. And I started looking around, and not only are Mk.1 Singer type rear sights available, they're available in great numbers. They aren't super cheap. I mean, if you shop around on eBay, you might be able to find a used one very affordably. I got one, they're apparently still brand new, wrapped in wax paper in cardboard boxes, just waiting to be snapped up. I paid about $65 for mine, but I got a brand new one. It's made by BSA, so it's actually correct for this rifle, or more or less correct for this rifle. And I'm going to install it today. I'm going to show you how to go about doing that. It's a pretty straightforward procedure, and I think that's actually going to give us the elevation adjustment that we need to shoot this rifle, despite its heinous appearance, at long range, and hopefully do so with some accuracy. Although this rifle's heavily modified, everything's all matching. The bolt matches the receiver, which matches the barrel. The bore is actually almost pristine. It's very filthy right now. It needs to be cleaned, but the rifling is good and sharp. And actually, the mechanism, the bolt, everything is in practically brand new condition, other than the fact that it's been heavily modified. We have a number 0 bolt head in here, and I can tell you that as far as Lee Enfields go, this rifle has extremely tight headspace. No problem fire forming brass. I haven't noticed any case head stretch when I was shooting this rifle in the past. It's been a little while since I've shot it, but we're definitely going to do some shooting with it this summer. But now we're going to be doing it with a Mk.1 Singer type rear sight, which we're going to install now. Let's go do it. All right, folks, so here is our poor, forlorn No. 4 Mk.1. As you can see, there is no magazine, and the magazine well, the chamber is empty and the bolt is open, but we're going to go ahead and remove the bolt for the remainder of the video. If you're not aware of how to do that, there's a little catch here which is spring-loaded, and you just push that down. So we depress that, pull the bolt to its rearmost position, then you can rotate the bolt head up and simply withdraw the bolt from the rifle. And we'll just set that aside for right now. And here's our new Singer, Mk.1 type Singer rear sight. As you can see, it is absolutely brand new, although it's something like 70 years old. There's absolutely no wear on the bottom there. It's as good as new, and it was varnished almost completely shut. The preservative oil that was on the rifle over 70 years had completely polymerized into a sort of varnish. I had to soak it in acetone for about 2 hours until I could free up the slide. But now you can see the micrometer adjustment works just fine. You can see the slide moving upwards there. And there are markings on the sight to take us from 200 yards all the way out to 1,300 yards. So this should give us plenty of elevation. Now, of course, these markings are all going to be meaningless because the rifle has a slightly different sight radius than it used to. It's got a slightly shorter barrel, and therefore velocities are going to be a bit different. We're not using British Mark 7 ammunition for which this rifle sight was calibrated, but this is still going to give us plenty of fine adjustment, and we're just going to have to learn what our ranges are. The cool thing is the rifle, as I mentioned, was made by BSA, and just by luck of the draw, the Singer sight that I bought has a B on it there, and a B on it there, and a B on it there. And that all indicates that this Mark 1 sight was made by BSA. So it's kind of appropriate for the rifle. And it's going to end up on the rear of the receiver, fitting in between these two ears right here. That's what it's going to look like when it's installed, sort of. Tension for the sight is provided by this plunger and spring, which are going to go down into the receiver. There's a hole right here that those go down into, and then through these two trunnion ears that the sight pivots on is going to go this pin, and apparently this collar is necessary for some applications, but not ours. So that's going to go back in the Ziploc bag. And then this tiny, tiny little pin here is a retention pin that goes through the little hole on the end of our pivot pin. So this has definitely been used. There's some wear marks on it. As I run my thumbnail over it, though, I can't really notice any serious wear. There's no grooves or anything in here, so it shouldn't affect the sight too much. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this mechanism assembled, our plunger and spring, and we're just going to put a little Teflon oil onto that. That's a lot of focus, isn't it? Yeah, so we've got a little bit of oil on there now. There, I did that a little bit better. And as I said, this plunger and spring are going to go down into this hole in the receiver. And you'll see this has a flat side on it, which goes against the inside of the ear there. And for the moment, we're just going to leave that in place. I'm going to get a little bit of grease because I want to put a little bit of grease on this top surface where it will engage the bottom of our Singer sight. Hopefully that stays in place. It looks like it's going to. So I've just got a thin layer of grease on the tip of my finger. You don't have to go crazy with this. And I'm just going to apply a little bit of that to this top surface of that plunger. Wipe off my finger a little bit. Now our Singer sight, as I said before, oh, I got a little too much grease there, didn't I? Let's get that out of the way. As I said, our Singer sight is just going to go down in between these two ears. And so, as it turns out, it takes a bit of patience and something like a three-armed gorilla to get this plunger depressed enough to get the sight lined up. So I'm using a slightly smaller drift punch as a slave pin, which seems like a pretty good idea. And now I'm going to try to put the proper pin through the hole here by pushing out our slave pin as best I can. And sure enough, there we go. We've got our pin in place. Check the function. Yep, Singer sight seems to be working very nicely. Now I've just got to get the hole lined up so that we can put in the little retention pin that goes in there. So I'm going to step away again for a second because I'm going to need to get my face close to this to see what we're doing. To rotate the pin, you can simply put a very small screwdriver in here and turn the pin until you can see the hole for this tiny little retention pin lined up in the slot there. And so, as I suspected could happen, I ran out of phone memory. Luckily, it happened at exactly the right time. The project was just about over anyway. That tiny little cross pin went in just fine. No problems whatsoever. It's very straightforward. If you get the rest of the thing done, including compressing this plunger, you're certainly not going to have any trouble getting that little pin in there. So all in all, I think it came out very well. Our Mk.1 Singer type rear sight is now installed on the No.4 Mk.1, and I can tell you it is much, much better than the barrel mounted rear sight here. There's nothing wrong with this alignment. It's just mounted way too low. Plus, I want to try doing some long-range shooting with this rifle. So it's much, much more comfortable looking through the aperture. And even when we dial this all the way up to, let's say, 1,000 yards, which I'm probably never going to shoot at, with this very high comb, even at 1,000 yards, I have a pretty good cheek weld to the rifle stock. That tiny little bead on the Redfield front sight, it's a fairly long blade, but it has a tiny little bead on it, should allow for some very fine aiming. I only wish I could find the hood that slid over this sight initially. It has tracks on either side for a target hood, which would be great. But I think this is going to work out very well. And even when it's folded down and we're looking through our battle sight, which is just a fixed sort of ghost ring, that's also very easy to get centered up. All in all, I just couldn't be more pleased with this rear sight. It might be an abomination to put it onto this abomination of a rifle. Some of you may disagree with using a nice brand new minty military part on a rifle that's never going to be in military configuration again. If so, let me know in the comments down below. I hope this has proved useful to somebody. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing. It goes a long way to help keep me here on the tube. Also, like, share, tell your friends. If you're already a subscriber, click the little bell icon down below. That'll allow YouTube to send you notifications when I post new content to the channel. And when I do that, I hope to see each of you here then. Later, guys.